Hey guys, welcome back to Pistons Talk Podcast. Hope you guys are having a great Sunday evening so far. We have a first-time special guest. You probably know him as Pistons Jacob over on his YouTube channel. Man, welcome to the show. Really happy to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. It's kind of crazy. I've been watching the show for ages now, so to be a part of it is an honor, and looking forward to talking some Pistons off season with you.
I know that was a dog, but it sounded like a lion in the background.
Yeah, he's got quite the growl. And just for the record, his name is Zeke, so
Hey,
he's tied in. He's tied in. So
shout out. Before we do kind of get into the podcast, when I do have a guest on, I let them plug themselves. So if you have anything you want to promote, plug your YouTube channel, your Twitter, floor's yours, man.
yeah, for sure. So I just started making Pistons-based YouTube content in the end of June, right around the time of the draft. It's been super fun. If you just search up Pistons Jacob, maybe I'll drop a comment after the stream or something like that. So you can quickly click on the profile, but been uploading over there pretty consistently. So that's probably the best spot to find me for sure.
I do have your YouTube in the description below, so people can just click your link and it'll go directly to your YouTube channel. I will say though, during the summer when there was draft stuff, your videos would pop up a lot. I'm like, look at this kid. He's just killing it right now. I got to talk to him. I got to have him on. I love seeing people grind, make YouTube videos. And the fact that, you're a Piston fan, I respect it and I admire it a lot. So there's not a lot of us out there that actually consistently talk about the Pistons like on a weekly basis. So respect, man.
Yeah, they'll all come flooding back once we get back into the mix. It's just the hard fought fans are the ones that are still kicking around and doing this stuff and listening to this stuff. It's no shame and not tapped in with a 14-win team. I really can't blame some people. So
yeah,
I think we're the crazy ones.
I would say so. I mean, I got into it like in '96. That's when I first started watching when I was around like 4 or 5. So I grew up on like the Teal Grant Hill era.
Teal era, yeah.
So I mean, they were still good, but they weren't like, to the point where like the go in the work crew, like we thought we were gonna win the championship. It seems like every other year. But I mean, I've been through the good times and the bad times since Tom Gores has purchased a team. But hey, man, maybe we'll get back to the playoffs eventually.
Just want to win a game. It's been since the Bush administration, I think, since they won a playoff game. So hopefully when we do get back, it's not like it was in 2019 and whatnot, because there's a lot of young fans out there who have not seen anything at this point. I was lucky that I started watching when I was really young. My dad was a big Pistons fan, so I got to see that going to work team, even though I was 7, 8 years old. But man, there's kids out there who are 23 who haven't seen a Pistons playoff win yet. So it's been rough.
You can definitely tell by the Twitter avatars because they're all Cade avatars.
Yep.
Like you can tell the guys that are like young Pistons Twitter, but it wouldn't shock me if there's like a 40-year-old with a Cade avatar out there. It just wouldn't, just because like, he's your franchise player. But it's really weird seeing like I know this is completely off topic, but I remember when we had Blake, it'd be nothing but like a Blake avatar or a Tony Snell or like even like a Andre Drummond avatar. Now it's all Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey avatars. It's really funny just to see how the fans just find a new favorite player. But speaking of Cade Cunningham, I don't know if you saw, but Hoops Hype has been doing their top 30 positions. And Cade Cunningham was ranked the 13th best point guard by Hoops Hype. 1, what did you think of this list? And 2, do you think Cade was properly rated by Hoops Hype?
Yeah, so, when you hear Cade, 13th best point guard in the league, your knee-jerk reaction, if you're a big Cade supporter and believer like me, it's like, that seems about right, maybe a little low. And then you see some of the names that he's ahead of, and it seems pretty generous. Honestly, it's right where I would probably peg him if I'm being completely objective and not letting my fan bias get in the way. I think he was one spot ahead of LaMelo on that list, and I think LaMelo has faced a lot of the same concerns as Cade has in his first couple of years, right? Injuries, not being on the best of teams, even though the Hornets have won a few more games in their time there. But yeah, I thought it was about right. I mean, it seems low just because Cade's been really good on a bad team, but there's just 12 other really elite point guards in the league right now.
I tend to agree. Like when I was reading the list and I was going through it, for people that haven't seen the list, I'm going to put it on the screen for you guys real quick. This was the top 30. Cade is slotted in right there at 13th. To what Jacob was talking about, LaMelo's right there. James Harden, Drew Holiday. It still bothers me that he's 18th. I don't know why. It's a two-time champion. Like I'm like, really, Drew Holiday 18th, but Cade is right there at that 13th slot, behind Jamal Murray, Kyrie Irving, Trae Young, all those guys. But kind of bothered me that Drew Holiday was 18th. I was just like, really? He just won another NBA championship with another team, and he's not even like bubble like top 10. I don't know, but I thought for the most part the list was pretty accurate for the point guard rankings, and I think there's a chance that he could crack into the top 10 if he has a good season like he did last season. He's going to have more spacing now, obviously. Who's to say he can't go like 22, maybe close to 10 assists and a couple of rebounds a night on efficient shooting?
Yeah, and even if he just hypothetically kept the same stat line that he had last year, 23-8 or whatever, if they were just a more competitive team, that stat line all of a sudden becomes a lot more impressive to people who are not Pistons fans, right? I think a lot of it's just held back by the win total because his stats are not far off from guys who are making all-star games like Paolo and these other guys, other point guards too. I think a lot of it just has been a product of the situation. And if we were just a 30-win team instead of a 14-win team last year, I think that it wouldn't be out of the question to say that he could be debating with those guys like De'Aaron Fox and Trae Young for that 10th spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has the potential to, put himself in as a top 10 point guard in this league. He has all the tools, 3-level scorer. Seems like he's just like the mid-range king on this team. Every mid-range shot, I think it's going to go in. It just looks cash. Even shot 35% from three, which I think is good. I think he could get possibly up to 37, 38. I think adding a guy like Fred Vincent can, uptick everyone's percentage and help them become better shooters. But I thought 13th for the most part was fair. Now, Hoopslipe also released their shooting guard rankings, and they had Jaden Ivey ranked as the 24th best shooting guard. Now, this is where I think I don't necessarily agree with this list because they have small forwards in this ranking, which is it's kind of clunky. For people that haven't seen the list, this is the list of the shooting guards. So obviously you have Ant Edwards, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, Jaylen Brown, and Jalen Williams in your top 5. And then if you scroll down the list, you have guys like Jaden Ivey, Jordan Poole, KCP, and Jordan Clarkson kind of above him. But what were your thoughts on the shooting guard rankings and having Jaden Ivey as the 24th best shooting guard?
It's just a tough one with Ivey because a lot of what I believe about Ivey is just pure hypothetical at this stage, especially coming off of last year where his role was different every month. We all know what that situation was under Monty at the start of the year. Had some games where he was like the 6th guy off of the bench, not the 6th man, like the 6th guy that checks into the game off of the bench. And it's just hard to put him any higher. And I get it from like their perspective, right? I think that there's a world where Jaden Ivey is improved this year. Talk about Fred Vincent, right? If Ivey all of a sudden becomes slightly above league average shooting and below, still using that speed to get by people, all of a sudden the roof is just super high with him. But as of right now, based on just looking at last year and his production, it's hard to argue him any higher on that list. Even guys like Caruso that are behind him, I think if you asked competitive teams in the league right now who they'd rather have, Caruso or Ivey, most of them are going to say Caruso, because I think a lot of this stuff with Ivey is still hypothetical. I'm a believer in him, but just based on his production last year, which was a lot of times seemed like it was out of his control even, it's just hard to argue him any higher than that, to be honest.
Yeah, last year was so weird for him because I think a lot of us coming into the season thought that we were going to see a Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey backcourt to start the season. And it was Killian Hayes.
Here comes 7.
And we're like, okay, well, maybe Jaden Ivey just wasn't, maybe wasn't ready for that week. And then it went on for like a good half the season where Killian Hayes was in the starting lineup. And you can kind of look at the starting lineups if you guys want to go back on the Pistons Twitter account. It was just like Isaiah Livers, Killian Hayes, Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart. And you're just like, what year is this? 1990? Like, there's no damn spacing around
Yeah.
this team. And you arguably you have one of your better scorers off the bench, not getting reps with your franchise player, who a lot of people think that, Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey can be that next great Detroit Pistons backcourt together. And you kind of wasted a whole year of development. You wasted a whole year of what they could possibly be. And obviously that was a Monty Williams decision because, Troy and Tom said, yo, bro, like, what the fuck you doing? Like,
Yeah.
We just drafted this guy a couple of years ago, 5th overall. We want to see what's there with him. But in terms of the rankings, I honestly I could see him. Oh, wrong one. My bad. I could honestly see him around that 13 to 15 range if he has a good season. You have guys like Devin Vassell, Malik Monk, and Cam Thomas. I think he has another gear to get to that pathway. And when he was consistent throughout the season, I would say certain months where he was shooting a high volume from three. I remember there was a game where he hit 7 threes, hit 30 points. I think that's where I could see him in that range, in between that 13 to 15 range, if he's just more consistent. I think the thing with him, and you touched on it, is we don't really know what the type of player he's going to be. We don't know if he's just going to be this, electric superstar guard, or if he's going to be, possibly a sixth man. I think there's a lot of question marks of what he's going to be. I think a lot of fans in the Pistons community think very highly of him and think that, a big reason why there were so much issues was a coaching issue, and I tend to agree with it. But I think the rankings for right now are fair. He just has to show not only Pistons fans, but, NBA writers that make these lists that he's more consistent, because there were stretches, and I think it was February, March. I think he shot sub 20% from three.
Yep. And then you have another month where he was 38, 39%. And that goes all the way back to his rookie year too. There'd be month-long stretches where he's hitting and month-long stretches where he's not. So it's just I don't know. The best version of Ivy is good as Cam Thomas, is as good as Vassell. But are we going to see that version of Ivy consistently is really the question, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with him is just consistency, because when he puts it all together, you have an electric guard with a really fast first step, transition nightmare. He got better defensively last year. I will give him that credit. It's just he has to be more consistent, and I think he will be with the right coaching staff. Sounds like JB Bickerstaff has a plan for him, wants to stagger him and Cade Cunningham, has a clear-cut plan of how he wants to run sets with them, which is refreshing to hear a coach that actually has a plan for him and not just saying we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm really refreshed with JB Bickerstaff. Every interview I listen to him, I want to run through a wall. I was like, finally, we have a coach that wants to be here and actually has a clear-cut plan. But I think for the rankings, fair for now, but who's to say he can't kind of crack into that, top 15 if he has a consistent season this year?
I agree 100%. And everyone loves to talk about what the new players like Beasley and Harris and all of them can do for spacing for Cade, but it's just as much for Ivy as it is him. He can get by anybody. And if they're in more of a 5-out type of setting, or even 4-out, 1 in, Duren's coming to set a screen for him or whoever it is in the game, you give that man more space and he can use it to his advantage just as well as Cade can. Cade will use that space in a different way, but if the paint's more cleared out and Ivy has a more clear path to the hoop, his finishing might look more like it did in Purdue, especially at the rim numbers, which probably haven't been as great as what some Pistons fans thought it would be when we drafted him. I think that, that could just help him as much, maybe even more than Cade, having all that space out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to finish around the rim when you have the lane clogged with 2 centers out there, basically. It's just man, there's no room for me to get to the basket right now. I don't really think we're going to see those two big lineups anymore. Thank God. It's completely off topic. I've been just so against the two big lineups because you don't have a stretch big like a Lauri Markkanen or something for it to make it, at least make sense. But that's just always been my stance in the two big lineups. Forcing Isaiah Stewart to be a stretch forward just never made sense to me.
Yeah, we don't even really have the personnel anymore to run them. Even if hypothetically they wanted to, they just don't have the big depth to even do that at this stage. There's just not the guys there. Wiseman's not there anymore. Bagley's not there anymore. So they wouldn't have enough bodies to run out those lineups. So the guys are going to have to split minutes. So,
I mean, unless you just want to be a complete sicko and run Paul Reed and Isaiah Stewart off the bench together.
They can junk some things up defensively. I don't know. I don't know if we'll see it. I don't know.
We'll see though. But like I said, you never know. Right, Troy Weaver collected all the bigs in Washington. I mean, Washington has like 5 centers, so maybe they'll be running the two big lineups out there.
Valanciunas signing this summer, I was like, okay, sounds good.
Like, yeah, we'll trade you when it's December 15th. Don't worry. I was like, why sign him then? Like, what are you doing?
yeah, that's I don't know.
But let's kind of like retract back to the Pistons. So there's been a lot of talk with Pistons fans with this upcoming season. Obviously, for the most part, we know what the roster is going to be. So my question to you is, how many games can you see the Pistons winning this season?
30, which might seem high to some people. I mean, what's Vegas has is at 25.5 right now. Mm-hmm. I think 30 is really realistic, but I could see a world where it's as high as 32, 33, and they're fighting for a play-in. And I can also see a world where it's 24, 25, because towards the end of the year, we're not where we want to be. And they want to, play it safe, take some guys out of the rotation like we have for the past 4 years at the end of the year. So I think like 30 is a fair number. I think that the guys that we signed in the off season might not be the dudes that jump off the page as far as names go. Tobias Harris, Beasley, etc., Paul Reed, THJ. But the fact of the matter is that they're replacing guys who a lot of them won't be having NBA rotation minutes this upcoming season. We're talking Killian, Wiseman, even Kevin Knox, Isaiah Livers, and a lot of those guys I liked, especially as people. I believe in their future as players, but when you're replacing those project players with dudes like Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, who have proven to be guys who show up, compete, play 70-plus games per year, relatively healthy, contribute to good teams, I think that's enough to make a bigger jump than people are giving them credit for. It feels a lot like the Houston Rockets situation last year when they signed a couple vets and everyone's like, what are they doing that for? And then all of a sudden they make a big jump. It feels like that to me. Maybe there's a little homerism kicking in there to feel that strongly about it. But I just think that with what they did this offseason and what they lost this offseason, I think 30 wins is possible.
I do too. I think a lot of things have to go right for them to win 30 games. Health, for sure, has to be like the number one thing that I think we have to talk about, because going from 14 to 30 wins is a huge jump. And I think if, the Pistons go from 14 to 30, people would probably like throw JB Bickerstaff's name in Coach of the Year, just because the Pistons were a national just clown show last year. Every day on ESPN, they were just saying, like, what's wrong with the Pistons? Monty Williams is a good coach. Must be the Pistons' fault. Like, never taking accountability when maybe, Monty didn't want to be there. Maybe his heart wasn't into it. Coaching with the Pistons, because we saw it out there. We're like, why are we running an all-bench lineup again? Doesn't work. Like, just stuff like that. But I think 30 wins isn't too far off. I have them like around that 27 to 29 range personally.
For sure.
Schedule's supposed to come out, I think, either next week or the week after. I'm expecting a lot of back-to-backs. I'm expecting not a lot of nationally televised games. Last season was brutal. It was. I personally think, though, around that 27 to 30 win range wouldn't really surprise me. But in the back of my brain, I could totally see them, waving the white flag for Cooper flag
For
towards the end of the season. I think a lot of teams are going to do that. I know the Pistons have been kind of like shafted in the lottery the past 3 years, getting fifth. But I could see them, like, let's say, maybe they're 6-7 games out of like a play-in spot. I could see them kind of having the shutdown season of like injuries for the remainder of the season, and just throwing out like two-way G League guys out there and just say like, yeah, we're not going to make the playoffs, we're not going to make the play-in, we're just going to try to compete out there, and if we get a lucky ping pong ball, we get a lucky ping pong ball, and whatever.
Yeah, and the heart of me is like so over that, right? Like, I'm just so tired of seeing dudes who are on two ways starting games in March and April. It's just so hard. But also the brain in me, the realistic brain in me, is like, you know what? First of all, gambler's fallacy. Fifth pick last year, fifth pick the year before. Who cares? The odds are the odds. And this draft class that's upcoming is actually super deep. I think that the fifth pick in this upcoming draft is more valuable than the first pick in the last draft. There's 5 guys on the upcoming draft where if they were to get added to this team, hypothetically, a year down the road, I think would be huge. Ace Bailey, Harper, those guys, there'll be plenty of dudes on the board, even if we don't land flag. So as much as my heart hates to even think about that, it hurts to even talk about it at this point. The realism in me is like, if that's the situation where 6 games out of the play-in and there's 9 games left on the schedule, you live with it. You just do it, right?
Yeah,
Dennis Jenkins, go cook, I guess. Whatever.
So Lou Smith, you never know. Maybe he'll get that final two-way spot, still have one available. But so did have a question in here. So this comes from Derek Brown, who want to kind of answer his question. So obviously, if we do make the playoffs, we lose our draft pick, correct, because of the Isaiah Stewart trade. You are correct on that. I believe it is either top 13, I want to say.
And then it keeps like rolling back, right? And then like next year, it'll be top 9 protected or something along those lines.
And if it doesn't convert by 2027, it's a second round pick.
Second round, yeah.
I want to say it's top 13, but I don't have it pulled up in front of me. But if you're a top 13 team, that means you're in the playoffs. You're not a play-in team. So you can still make the play-in and keep your pick, essentially. Like, because when you look at the bottom half of the lottery, like you look at like 13, 14, those are teams that were competing for like 9, 8 seeds. So I think if they were to make the playoffs, hypothetically, and they're a play-in team, they most likely probably get to keep their pick. But hey, you never know.
That pick has just kind of haunted us. It's tied our hands for a long time when it comes to trading draft capital. And maybe it's a blessing in disguise, because who knows, maybe Weaver would have tried to make a Hail Mary trade with those picks eventually. Who knows, right? Like, it's just hard to say, but that pick has tied us up for a long time. So whenever it converts, I'll just be happy it's done and finished with.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised that trade and the draft protections lasted longer than Troy Weaver's tenure. That's actually kind of hilarious if you think about it. Like, we still have protected picks on an Isaiah Stewart trade, and Troy made that trade in 2020. Like, never. Like, I think Dwayne Dedmon is still on our books too. He traded for Dwayne Dedmon like his first year. I'm like, Dwayne, he's not even playing in the league anymore. We're still paying him dead cap space money. Wow, like, really? Damn.
Yeah, shows up on the cap sheet. Still, it's almost as bad as Josh Smith was. That was a whole other story where you'd be looking at the cap sheet and see his name on there when he was 3 years removed from the league.
Josh Smith there, man. You're gonna give some people some PTSD in here. Good Lord, man. I've not thought about Jay Smooth in a minute. So the Pistons do have a roster spot available. So my question to you is, which position do you think that they'll use it on? Do you think they'll go back up point guard? Do you think maybe they go for a rim protection center? What are you thinking?
You can really argue any which way. I think the most popular thing that people have thought about is backup point guard. When Tyus Jones was still on the market, that seemed like a really good person to maybe look at to fill that role. Markelle Fultz is still out there. That's another dude who, not sure what the deal is, why he hasn't been picked up by anybody, but he's someone you could look at for that role for backup point guard. there's a lot of different ways they go with it. And for some reason, they don't have to use it, right? Like they can go into the season with 14 guys rostered, right?
I don't know that officially.
Yeah, I just read that on Twitter from like one of those cat expert guys like Keith Smith or something. And I think that might be what they do, because I just feel like it's been a while since free agency is open now. I feel like if they really had somebody in mind, like one of these guys that we actually know by name, like Markelle Fultz or whoever it might be, I feel like they would have got it done by now. So I don't really know. There's nobody left out there who really moves me that much, where I'm like, okay, like that's someone you really want to go get. And even if it is the last roster spot, how much burn are they going to get? A fun name to throw out there is Yabalus from the French national team. He was kind of killing it in the finals against the USA. A lot of people were giving him comps to Ben Wallace. I don't think based on play, but based on the throw. So if they wanted to take a look at maybe a Euro prospect, who knows? Maybe it could be the next Simone Fontecchio situation, a guy who none of us have ever heard of comes over ready to play at an NBA level. So I've bounced around back and forth on it a lot. There's not that many bigs left that I see on the free agent market that are someone who I think could really come in and contribute. So I guess if they're going to have to spend it on a guy who we actually have top of mind right now and they're willing to do it, Markelle Fultz would probably be the best answer.
Yeah, I thought they were going to do something because there was a report that they tried to get Patrick Beverley. I was like, okay, they're looking for another, veteran point guard. And I want to give Ryan Bozeman some credit because every week he comes in here and he says, I'm a broken record, but John Wall is out there too. Yeah, John Wall's trying to make an NBA return. I don't know what he has left in the tank. I really don't, but it would be a really good player to bring in for Jaden Ivey because I think their games are very similar. Maybe he could shed some knowledge. I don't know Trajan Langdon and the Pistons front office look at a guy like John Wall. To your point, I think Markelle Fultz is a name. I also think Dennis Smith Jr. could be a name. You have a reunion there. He's gotten a lot better since he was in Detroit. I will say that. I think defensively, he showed a lot of stuff that I liked when I was watching some Brooklyn Nets games. He looked good, but you kind of look at the box scores. It's like 6 points a game. It's just like, what are we getting ourselves into at that backup spot? But to your point, it might just be a situation where maybe we have an injury in training camp and we bring back Kevin Knox for the third time.
Yeah, well, that's part of it. If Troy was still the GM, it'd be a lot easier to predict this. You just want to go look at the last 5 drafts and figure out who was drafted top 7 and has fizzled out of the league because you could count on that last roster spot going to a reclamation project. But it's really hard to get a grip on what Langdon's thinking at this point.
Yeah, he's really hard to read. Like, even like going into the draft, like I thought Modest Bazelis or Cody Williams was going to be drafted. I said, watch him draft Ron Holland just because he has the highest ceiling, and he did it. I was just like, okay, here we go. I was just like,
how did you feel about it initially? Did you have a reaction to it that is maybe different than how you feel now?
My initial, it's so funny you said that. I actually went back and watched my reaction because I did a reaction like right after they picked him, and I was reading the comment section. It was over 200 comments of people commenting, "What the hell are we doing? Oh my God, you drafted the worst guy, another Stanley Johnson 2.0." And I'm like, my reaction was, they're banking on the guy with the highest ceiling in the draft that was ranked like in the top 3, like him, Sar, and Modest Bazelis were, top 3 in early mock drafts. Mm-hmm. I thought if he hits, you look like the smartest guy in the room. And the jump shot doesn't look completely broken. Like the jump shot looks pretty fluid. And I think when he said we brought in Fred Vincent for a reason, I was like, okay, he thinks Fred Vincent can fix that jump shot. He could turn into, I know people throw this name out. Maybe he could turn into a Jaylen Brown type. If he turns into a Jaylen Brown type, I'd be ecstatic. I would. I know you probably would be ecstatic too.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, if it comes around, the dude's gonna hit. That's really the swing skill with him. And I honestly was so shocked on draft night. I was so shocked. I didn't even consider Ron Holland during the draft process. I just thought the Pistons took a SAR last year, and that'd be so much overlap in skill set that it'd just be no question. So yeah, I was looking at guys like Matas, Cody Williams, the guys everybody else seemed to be looking at. So initially I was like, man, I hate this pick. Like that's how I felt about it right away. But then after the offseason went on and they brought in shooting through free agency, I feel a lot better about it now than I did 10 minutes after I knew who the pick was.
I think I wasn't as surprised by it because from time to time, I'll have some Detroit Pistons beat writers on here, and they'll like kind of talk me off a ledge. Like,
Yeah,
James Edwards probably talked me off the ledge the most because he's saying like they could draft a guy like a Ron Holland and address shooting in the offseason. Like there's shooters available. Like a lot of people were like pounding their hand at the table for Dalton Connect. Like let's get Dalton Connect. He's the best fit. He's a good shooter. He'd be such a fit next to Cade. And like, I was like, yeah, I could like mess with Dalton Connect. But then you saw how far he slipped in the draft. And when I was talking to Bryce Simon, does the Pistons Pulse podcast, who does like a lot of draft stuff with Sam Vecini, he's like, yeah, man. He's like, I'm just not high on him. And I was just like, well, if Bryce isn't high on him, he must not be that good. So I was just like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, Bryce and Sam have some of the best draft content on anywhere. So, yeah, I think talking to those people beforehand probably gave you a little bit more preparation than what I was ready for because I was so dialed in on Matas or Cody Williams. I thought it was a coin flip between those two. And then when Ron Holland got his name called, I was just shocked. But it makes sense now. It all makes sense now.
Yeah, I mean, even like he did like a thing with Mark Spears over at ESPN, and he's like, yeah, I didn't even work out for Detroit. Like we didn't know where we were going. We thought possibly San Antonio, maybe Utah. And he's like, once the camera like pointed at me, he's just like, my mom's like, you going to Detroit? I was just like, wow, like he didn't even know. Yeah. And probably Trajan getting here so late, he didn't really get to do like a lot of that pre-draft evaluation stuff. So he's probably like, you know what, I'm just gonna get the guy that I think has the most potential in this draft.
For sure. And he does. I mean, it's as simple as if the shooting hits, he's an archetype that is the most sought after archetype in the NBA, which is a two-way wing that can space the floor, can get to the hoop, can defend, athletic, good size. What more could you possibly want out of the fifth pick in what was the worst draft class of the last 10 years? So I can't be mad about it now.
Yeah, I mean, like if Reed Shepard was there at 5 and we drafted Ron Holland, then like we'd have like different conversations, 100%. Like I thought if Reed slipped the 5, I was like, just draft him. That kid's a bucket.
Yeah.
Then even Houston's like, yeah, Jalen Green, we're not giving you that contract extension, bud. Like Reed's the future. I was like, yeah, they got a good one. The fact that they got the 3rd pick with the Nets pick, man, like if I'm a Nets fan, I'm probably like puking.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know. What would you feel about Jalen Green? I mean, he's got to be kind of an afterthought now, right? Do you think that's something that could work out here? I mean, the Cade and Jalen Green beef was a Twitter thing, not a personal thing.
Yeah, I mean,
guys. So, is that someone you would consider at all to take a swing on? Because, like you said, Reed's there now, Amen's there now. He might be.
It's funny. I had this conversation about a month ago, and people just pitchforks because they don't like Jalen Green, which I get. Like we have Cade. He was kind of talking greasy about Detroit during the pre-draft process when he didn't get selected. But I think for Houston to trade him, I don't really think we have the pieces that Houston would want. Like I think Houston, the reason why they didn't give Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun extensions is I think they want to go star hunting, and they have the draft picks and the young talent available that, let's just say Phoenix, for example. Let's say Phoenix is just absolutely just dog shit this year for whatever reason. Who's to say they don't throw the farm for Kevin Durant?
Yeah.
Who's to say they can't do that? I think that's why they didn't give him contract extensions. And also, like, you look at the players in that 2021 class, like Cade got $200 million, Mobley got $200 million, Scotty Barnes got $200 million. I mean, Franz Wagner got $200 million.
They all got it.
Him and Jalen Suggs are like really the only two that I can think off the top of my head that have not gotten that rookie max contract extension.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a weird one. It's a weird one. I don't know how I'd feel about it because I was totally out on Jalen Green and I never was much of a believer in him anyways. Not that I thought he was bad or anything. I just, if we didn't get Cade, I would have rather had Mobley. He wasn't someone I thought too highly of ever, but he did get really hot there at the end of the year. And I saw a few people floating around after they drafted Reed, what could possibly be. And how us Pistons fans are, I think we've talked about every possibility twice over at this point. So just thought it was something to think about. That would be interesting to see those two together in the backcourt.
Wouldn't surprise me if you saw, Scotty Barnes or Evan Mobley and Cade team up at least throughout their career one time. Like I think all those guys, even Jalen Green, they're all extremely close. There are clips of Cade Cunningham dunking and then kind of hitting Jalen Green like upside the chin.
Yeah.
Like those old like under 17 Team USA like runs. Like there's obviously that stuff, but for the most part, I think they're cool. Jalen Green just likes talking a lot of trash to Cade. And I think it's just because of the draft position. Like if he was drafted number 1, Cade was number 2, I doubt Cade would even talk. Like that's what it is at the end of the day. But I did want to get your reaction to JB Bickerstaff. So he was on the Road Tripping podcast this past week with Richard Jefferson and Alec Clifton. And I do have some audio that we can play because something that he said, I've been talking about probably for a year. And I'm very intrigued to hear what you think about what JB Bickerstaff used Cade Cunningham as.
What excites you about Cade Cunningham or a guy like Jalen Duren?
I think both of them are extremely talented. Cade's size and his ability to get to his spot never gets sped up. You look at him, he's always even keel. He's one of those guys that you can tell his teammates just want to be around because he has the ability to make them better. And so when you have a guy like that who can create his own in fourth quarters, make those types of plays with that size, like you can play him at 3 different positions if you wanted to. So he allows you.
So he went on to say that Cade could play up to 3 different positions. So my question is, would you be okay if JB Bickerstaff experimented with Cade playing shooting guard or small forward this upcoming season?
So if you would have asked me this last year, the answer would have been no, because effectively if Cade was playing off the ball last year, who does that mean bringing it up? Probably Killian. And I was not a Killian hater like some people. I was more of a Killian believer, but I just didn't think that that's someone who's worth taking the ball out of Cade's hands for. So if you're taking the ball out of Cade's hands and you're running him off more pin down screens, things like that to get to his spots, I would have to see it to believe in it, because I personally think that he's most effective just being a pure initiator, the guy who has the ball in his hands, making the decisions every single time up the floor. I guess it really just comes down to what it looks like. I'd have to see it. Because in that situation, who would be the initiator? Ivy, right? It would have to be. Who else on our team really has that capability? So maybe, I guess I'd be open to it, but I just have to see it. And as of right now, I feel like personally, Cade is most useful when he has the ball in his hands, when he's able to make all of the decisions, when he is the guy who is taking all of the heat from the defense, drawing the defense in. That's how I feel about him personally right now. Of course, there's always been camps of people who think that he's more of a 2 or a 3. I've never been there, especially considering the pieces we have around him. I thought when Monte Morris was here, I thought maybe that's someone who could set the table for him in a way that would make things interesting. But I just don't think we have the personnel to make it make sense right now. How do you feel about it?
I've always felt that he was more of a 2 than he was a 1. I have always thought that he had the vision and then passing ability to play point guard. And given his size, it being, I don't know, some days he's 6'6", other days he's 6'8". I don't know what it is. He's like a shapeshifter. Like you go on different sites, it's like, yeah, 6'8", no, 6'6", whatever. I like him more off ball, but I think I don't hate him at point guard. I mentioned like I wouldn't hate him kind of playing like a Jason Tatum role, Paul George role at the 3, because I think he has the scoring ability to play that role. But to your point, it's personnel based. the Pistons don't really have that personnel to have that luxury of Cade not having the ball in his hands and initiating the offense. Like theoretically, you could say Jaden Ivey could be that point guard, kind of just, drive to the lane, kick it out to Cade at playing shooting guard or small forward. I think it could work that way. But I think your biggest question I think a lot of fans would have is, can Jaden Ivey be an efficient point guard and not having like a high turnover rate, right? I think it's a lot of hypotheticals, but JB sees that there's a lot of versatility with him. He thinks he's more than just a point guard, and wouldn't surprise me if we see him in situations where Jaden Ivey's, bringing the ball up the court and, Cade's coming off maybe a dribble handoff screen and just like hitting a mid-range or hitting a three. I think there's a lot of creative things that you can do with Cade Cunningham just because of his skill set and the way he can score the basketball at all three levels.
Yeah, definitely. And when you mentioned Tatum, it got me thinking because, as we were saying, it is very personnel based. If you somehow, for whatever reason, swap Tatum and Cade got to play with Drew Holiday and Derek White, all of a sudden this makes a lot more sense in my head where he's getting looks, that Tatum gets. Like, that's the type of offense that you can plug him into, and I think he'd be able to do that. But we don't have a Derek White and we don't have a Drew Holiday to make it make sense in my head for him to go off the ball and take those dribble handoffs and pin down screens to get to his spots where I think he would be good for sure. But I just don't see lineups that we could currently make it make a whole lot of sense. But I know JB Bickerstaff mentioned that, and he's also mentioned things like he wants to keep one dynamic player on the floor, which reading between the lines feels like that he's saying that he's going to stagger Cade and Ivy. So maybe that's all hypothetical. But yeah, really the big takeaways, I just don't know who the ball would be in the hands of, because like, what are the other options there? Marcus Sasser? I mean,
you could get creative and say, hey, Sasser, we know you played some backup point guard at OTE. Your handle's not the tightest, but we know that you have that court vision. Because Sasser, like, low-key last year had some absolute dimes, and you're like, damn, okay, Sasser, like, where'd that come from?
Wraparound passes. That's thinking outside of the box there. I didn't even consider that. Yeah.
I know some people are saying Sasser. I see Sasser more as a two guard. Like, the point guard experiment was the point guard experiment. I don't want to spend too much time on that because some people just – I'm telling you, man, Summer League, I thought Pistons fans would be like positive, excited, basketball's back for like a week, but they're like, I never want to see Marcus Sasser play point guard again. I was like, wow, okay, back to negative.
Yeah. No, we saw it in the Summer League, and that's that. We all watched the Summer League. I think Sasser is best be Marcus Sasser, which is a guy who, when he has the ball in his hands, he's going to work. He's looking to get to a step back. That's Marcus Sasser,
Yeah, I mean, kind of like a Lou Williams type of view. I'm not comparing the two, but we're down 7. Like, I need like 8 to 10 points. Just like, get me back in the game. Like, I don't need you to try to be a point guard, because playing the point guard position when you really haven't played it a whole lot throughout your career, that's a lot to ask out of somebody. And I've always gotten on the Pistons of trying to reinvent the wheel, like, play to his strengths, not something that is maybe a 3-year plan and you hope to develop it. And if you can turn into possibly like a backup point guard, that's another position he can play. Like, play to his strengths. Like, he's good at scoring. Like, the game against Milwaukee when he went absolutely berserk early in the season, like, that's Marcus Sasser at his peak.
Yep. What do you think about Duren being an initiator? How do you feel about that kind of stuff that we got little peaks at? Because that doesn't like effectively put Cade at the 2 on the paper or anything like that, but that does help him get more of the looks that you would maybe expect Cade to get in an off-ball role. Those plays where Duren would catch the ball high post and kind of either look for that back cut or, turn, hand the ball off to somebody else. I mean, he had a little bit of a different role this year in the offense than he did his last year, where he's allowed to pass a little bit more and things like that. How do you feel about that? I know that doesn't really put Cade at the 2, but it gives him some of those types of looks.
I think you can definitely get creative with Duren because I think he's a skillful enough passer to maybe find a guy cutting to the basket, like you mentioned, or kicking it out when he's getting double teamed in the post. I don't know if his passing and his dribbling skills are good enough to kind of initiate, like a few years ago, someone had mentioned it. Chili just mentioned it in the YouTube comment section. about having point Andre. So Andre Drummond was playing a lot of DHO his last few years under here in Detroit under Stan Van Gundy. And when he first started it, I'm just telling you, it was dreadful. Like dribble handoff offenses, I think only two bigs can do it, and that's Sabonis and Jokic. Like those are the two centers when you talk about DHOs for centers, like the most elite, big man, if you will, to play that DHO. I think Duren can do it, just not on a throw him the ball like every time like he's Jokic. Maybe 5 to 10 plays, you kind of switch it up offensively, seeing if he can, find Sasser cutting to the basket, or maybe Jaden Ivey's in the corner standing for three or something like that. I think you can definitely get creative with Duren, because I think he's more than just like a low post guy. I think there's some mid-range in there we haven't seen. I mean, he hit one over and beat it. Everyone was going crazy during the select stuff. There was a dunk on LeBron too that no one posted the highlight. Wonder why.
Did you see the Yabalus dunk getting photoshopped out yesterday, where they were photoshopping out LeBron?
Mm-hmm. Man, don't mess with Clutch Sports, man. You get
black SUVs rolling up.
Yeah, straight up. You can't have Brown getting dunked on like that. Yeah, I guarantee you they made a call like Photoshop them out.
Yeah. I had no idea about that with Duren, though. I only saw. It's so hard to get footage of those select games. I would love to watch that live. I guess they just, there's reasons they don't. But yeah, that'd be fun to watch live, especially with Duren being there this year, Cade and Duren there the year before. Feels like I'm like hunting in the depths of YouTube just to find clips of those games.
I found someone that uploaded like 30 minutes of one of the games where they only lost by one, and like. Those games were more competitive than the All-Star game. I will just say that. Like, the national team that just won gold, like Cooper Flagg was just hitting threes, blocking shots, locking up the best player. I was just like, bro, like, what? What is going on right now? It's like Duren was doing a good job at rebounding, protecting the paint, catching lobs. Like, I'd love to actually go to one of those select teams, just like scrimmages, just to see how intense it is, because like just a 30-minute YouTube video I watched, I was like, wow, that is more competitive than like the All-Star game. Like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, well, the bar for the All-Star game nowadays is pretty damn low. But the select team, I mean, Pistons have been on it recently, so it's like something that's always sparked my interest, and even now it's even more so. And those games are just fun. Like you said, Cooper Flagg being out there. I don't know how anyone can't be sold on Cooper after watching that, but that's besides the point. We can't afford another year of doing that. So that's besides the point. But I will say he was impressive.
What's funny is like people were saying, I know this is completely off topic, people are saying Cooper Flagg isn't a shooter. And he went into the select team and he couldn't miss from three. I was like, okay, have you been watching him? Because he can't miss a three right now. I mean, he's hitting a three right in Anthony Davis's eyes. Like, trying to contest the shot, he's like hitting like a 3-point shot. I was just like, okay, this kid's gonna be like a Karolinko or something like that. Like, he's gonna be special
for sure. I saw like the synergy stats that included his AAU time, his NYBL time, his time at Montverde, and it was like huge sample sizes of shooting. And I think that if there's anyone saying that he can't shoot, it's completely blown out of proportion. It's like middle of the road percentages, like 36% from three, even high percentage in the 35, 36 range for off dribble threes, which is pretty tough. It's 6'9" or whatever he is at this stage. So yeah, I mean, it's hard because I can't do another year of, looking at draft prospects and that being our Super Bowl, but man, he's something.
Yeah, I mean, the first 2 games into the season, I thought we were back, and then I was like, yeah, nope, 28 straight losses. Wingstop Pistons. Here we go.
I was at that home opener. It was the only game I went to last year. I went with my dad. We were walking back to the hotel. We were talking, this is the year playing. We're on the way. We're 2-1 right now. Things are looking great. We didn't win another game until January.
Oh my God. That's crazy. I went to one game, but I got invited. It was so random. So I got like a DM from Bally, and it was like they invited me into their suite, and I did not know what to expect going into it. And then it was a bunch of content creators So it was
Okay.
like Wayne County Life was there, who's like a really funny like content creator. Some guy that was on Big Brother, like he like dipped, took this free merch and like left. Craig Monroe was there. A bunch of Bally guys were there, and I was just like, we didn't even watch the game. It was Boyan. Funny enough, it was against the Cavs. It was Boyan's first game back in December. We still lost.
So this is mid 28 streak. It's probably like what, lost 20, something like that.
It was like 17 in a row, but it's just like that's the only game I went to last year. And like I didn't even watch the game, man. Like I was just talking to, because I've never been in a suite before, and it was like really cool.
Yeah.
And I was like, just talking to all these people, and like no one was watching the game, man. Like everybody was just eating food, watching the Red Wings like in the suite, like seeing if they'll win. I was just like, man, like this is crazy.
It's a lifestyle I'm not familiar with myself. So
yeah, that's crazy. Chili, yeah, it was Dan, the ex Orchard, like that's who it was. He took his stuff and then just dipped. Which everyone's like, there's a guy from Big Brother here. I was like, really? Because I don't.
Not anymore. He's gone now.
Yeah. Pretty sure he follows me at IG, but I've never met the guy in my life. But someone said that he was there. They invited him, and then he just like dipped. He's like, "Yeah, I'm out." I was just like, "Wow, all right."
What'd they give you guys for merch? Was it worth showing up and dipping for? It was a pretty cool
So
stuff.
they gave us a free year of Bally Sports Plus, which I gave it to my buddy Speakeasy, and he lost it, of course. They gave us like a Pistons like one of those like coaster cups, and there's like $40 in the Piston shop, and a hat or a beanie of your choice. So they gave us some stuff to even like show up and go there. I was just like, hey man, I was just there for the food because the spread was amazing.
Nice. Yeah, that's worth it then. That's fully worth it. They can't beat that. That's a good deal.
Yes.
I guess Bally Sports is moving up a small notch on my respect list at this stage.
Like I know people don't like work there, like production assistants, like social media people, like they're good people. It's just like the RSS feeds and the TV side, like I don't blame them for that. That's more of like a Diamond Sports Group thing. It's not even a Bally thing. It's just Diamond Sports Group are just like the worst people imaginable. Like I don't even know like how we're gonna watch games next year. Maybe My TV 20 Detroit, maybe Amazon. I don't know.
That's the whole thing. You know, it's like a scramble at this point. I don't even know what the deal is. And of course, it's not like we can just buy League Pass and roll with it because it'll just get blacked out. Because I always get League Pass, but that's useless in that situation. So, yeah, hopefully they figure it out. I miss the old days of just Fox Sports Detroit. Know what channel it is? We're in there. Hopefully they just get something sorted out because I know that like I didn't have too many problems with it last year, but I know a lot of people were unable to watch games because. Like my sister uses the app and she said the app didn't work for like 2 weeks and I don't know.
Yeah, so the app worked perfectly and then they decided to update it and then it didn't work anymore. I'm like, dog, like you didn't have to fix it. There was nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
You made it worse. Like it was like triple protection. I needed like 3 passwords and I had to log in on my computer and my TV at the same time just to watch. I'm like, what is this?
Need a fingerprint just to get the game on or something.
Oh my god, it's crazy. I know the Pelicans actually ditched Bally because they were one of the 5 teams. Apparently, the Bally was like threatening cutting. They're like, we're going to basic cable.
Yeah,
which I hope the Pistons do that, but I also still hope that we get to still see all the sideline reporters like Johnny and Natalie and all those guys out there.
Yeah, I mean if they get rid of Kelser or Blaha, then all of a sudden. We got bigger issues to worry about. Yeah, that's got to stay. All of that.
Yeah. We have one more topic, and then we'll get into your questions that you guys have been asking. I know Detroit Ball, and I did see your question. I have it starred. We'll get to it at the end of the end of this podcast. Don't worry, man. I try to answer each and every one of your questions. I don't want you guys to feel left out or anything like that. But we do have one more topic, and this, I think, is going to be a fun topic because I think we're going to have different answers. Who has more to prove this season, Jaden Ivey or Jalen Duren, in your opinion?
Jaden Ivey because he's 22 and Duren's 20. That might not seem like that big of a difference, but in reality, when you're talking about NBA players, when they typically break out, I don't think either of them will, but when they typically fizzle out, it's just a lot easier to justify a 20-year-old moving sideways in, improvement and development than it is a 22-year-old. When we're going into this season, I think Duren turns 21 in November. Hypothetically, if Duren stays more or less the same, what he was last year, a 13-point, 11-board guy who needs some work defensively, it's pretty easy to talk yourself into the fact that he's only 21 years old going into next year versus if Ivey shows us that he's the same player that he was last year, even despite Monty and him, that whole thing, him being in a lot of different roles, things like that. I think that's a bigger, maybe not an issue, but more of a, maybe this is who Ivey is rather than with Duren. It's more of a, he's still 20, 21. Let's just give it some time. So I think right now it's Ivey, but at the same time, it's not like either of these guys are do or die if they have a bad year or don't develop substantially. We have to, light the house on fire here. I think that it'll be fine either way. But if there's one guy that I would say probably has a little bit longer of a leash, it'd just be Duren because his age, really.
So I'm going to take a different approach to this because this is where I think a lot of fans are going to hear this conversation. I'm getting them ready for it because it's August. Both of these guys are contract extension eligible going into next summer. Okay.
Yeah.
You cannot keep all of these young guys. You just can't. I think both of them have areas where they need to improve. I think you hit a lot of nails on the head with Duren. He needs to improve defensively. Now, is he going to get the $200 million contract that Cade got, him or Ivey? Probably not. No, I don't think so. Unless they just come out like crazy. Like if Duren's blocking like 2.5 shots, then yeah, maybe you have those conversations. If Ivey comes out scoring 20 plus points a game, sure. To me, I think Duren has more to prove because I don't honestly think that, I know some people in the community think that, Duren's a lock to be this franchise center for the next 10 years. I'm not entirely sure. I think the Pistons need to see some development and growth defensively because last year was just atrocious. If I'm being honest, like defensively, he even admitted to Vinny Goodwill at the select team that he wasn't trying. He said it wasn't my ankles, wasn't my injuries. It was an effort thing. I wasn't trying. And I like that he took accountability in that. But at the same time, I'm like, why weren't you giving effort on the court last year? Like that's kind of a red flag to me. Getting back to it, I think it's Duren. I think with Ivey, the questions I have with him is just consistency and can he fit with Cade Cunningham? I'm not sure. That's a whole nother conversation and a whole nother rabbit hole you can go down. I think they can fit, but Ivey has to be more of a consistent shooter. But I think it's Duren. He has way more to prove, in my opinion, because I think there's more question marks with Jalen Duren than there is Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey is mostly just fit and being consistent. Duren, it's just like, do we need to go get another center? Do we need to get someone that can protect the rim? Because, when you came in as a rookie, you were protecting the rim. Don't know what happened there. You go into your sophomore season, different coach from Casey to Monty, you regressed a lot defensively. So I think, in my opinion, it has to be Duren.
Yeah, for sure. And see, that's the tricky part with both of these things because, like you said, Duren has showed the ability to protect the rim, not only in his rookie year. I mean, it wasn't world class, but he was doing it a lot better than he was towards the end of the last season. And at the start of this season, too. In those first couple of games, the one against Charlotte, the one against the Bulls where he won, he was making an impact defensively. Same thing with Ivey. The big question with him is, can he cut down the turnovers and can he shoot the ball a little better? We've seen him do those things, just not for consistent stretches of time. We've seen both of those guys do those things, just not for a consistent time. So really, at this point, it's just who can figure out how to make the best version of themselves, the version that you get every night. And then there's your answer,
Yeah, I will say, I think when you talk about contract extension, I think both of these guys could easily clear $100 million. Like some people say, like, well, we're just going to give them what we gave Isaiah Stewart. I think Isaiah Stewart honestly gave the Pistons kind of like a discount And I know he gets so much hate in the community, and I understand it, but I don't agree with it because I still think he's a good rotational player. I don't think he should be your starting power forward. I think he should be kind of like an energy guy off the bench, maybe a backup center, backup power forward. I think that's more of where he can carve a role in the league, but would not surprise me if the Pistons offer Jalen Duren a $100 million contract extension going into next summer. Wouldn't surprise me if you hear talks about Jaden Ivey possibly getting a $100 million contract extension with the Pistons, because I think both of these guys are extremely talented. It's just you have to ask yourself, what do we value more? Do we value a guy that could be a 15 to 20 point per game scorer that can get to the basket at will? Or do we value a guy that doesn't look like he's 20? He looks like he's chiseled. He's so huge as a 20-year-old. He can't even legally drink. You see all the tools. You see the comps coming out of college. Everyone thought this was like the next Dwight Howard. Like, you have to ask yourself, what do you value? Because you cannot keep both of these guys on the roster if you're serious about winning, if you're serious about making the playoffs. And that's the conversation I want fans to kind of, I know it's kind of putting salt in the wound and kind of being negative, but you financially cannot afford to keep all of these young guys. Someone is going to be a casualty.
Yeah, especially when you start talking about Sasser and Ron and start thinking long-term vision with this stuff, then it gets way more convoluted. And like you said, with Stewart's contract, the last year on it's a player option. It's really not a bad contract at all. And I think he was just miscast, which is why you get that reaction from a lot of fans and things like that. And in my mind, if either of these guys can get retained on contracts similar to that, I don't think that ties our hands whatsoever, and it almost might be a blessing long term, right? Where, I mean, you don't want this to happen, but if either of these guys develop sideways and don't get much better this year, and they end up re-signing a Stewart contract for $15 million a year, that's maybe not the worst thing in the world, as crazy as it sounds. But that's almost like a second option, like plan B, right? Obviously, we want these guys to get better and get better fast so we can not be bottom feeders. So that's not the ideal situation, but it's maybe a glass half full vision if things don't work out as well as we want them to.
Yeah, I just think you wasted a whole year last year with Ivy, because if you would have started him right off the gate, I think we could have more of a conclusive opinion about, can Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham fit? You wasted all last season on that, because he has had to change his role his past 2 years. He went from playing with Cade for 12 games to being the starting point guard to being a sixth man behind Killian Hayes, who's trying to fight for a roster spot with the Brooklyn Nets right now. Like, in my opinion, I think you wasted a whole year of development and a whole year of questions that the front office and the organization may have needed answers to. And I think this year right now is just going to be a year of evaluation for Trajan Langdon, because he didn't draft these guys. The only guys he drafted are Ron Holland and Bobby Klintman. So he doesn't really have any ties to any of these guys in the organization. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I mean, I've even seen like some beat reporters kind of float out, like, why don't you trade these guys now while they have value? Like, you don't want to hold on to them for too long, because that's something that the Pistons do so much. Like, Andre Drummond is the first player I think of. Like, we could have traded him for multiple years and then we get a second because we just had to get rid of him.
Yeah, definitely. And then there's the other side of the coin too, where we did get rid of guys that turned out to be great, but it wasn't first round lottery picks. It was the other side of the spectrum, the Chris Middletons of the world. So you get fans that also want to hold on to these guys forever just so they don't get burned and have a Chris Middleton situation, or even Dinwiddie Bruce Brown, you can go on. So I get both sides of it. And truthfully, just as the fan in me, like I'm already sold on both of these dudes and most of our young core, that it's really hard for me to like want to ship them off. I know it seems like every Pistons fan has one guy that they're down on, and they always are screaming at the top of their lungs, we need to dip out on them ASAP. Yeah. I don't have that guy on the roster. I really do believe in the core is individuals. The fit, that's another question. And like you said, we just don't have answers to the fit between Ivy and Cade. And it just wasn't showing last year. There was not that many times where I can think back of last year where Cade and Ivy were sharing the floor and I saw them together and thought, wow, they're playing off each other so well right now. but there also wasn't many times where I saw them on the floor together and I thought that it was a disaster. What I do know is the few games where Cade was out and Ivey went back to his rookie year role of being the main ball handler, that's when we saw some of those huge outbreak games. I think one was against the Kings on a West Coast trip where Cade was out and Ivey took over. So that is like something, but it's also not much. So
yeah, I like I said, I get both sides of the coin. I want to prepare Pistons fans because these conversations are going to happen. Like I was reading an Athletic article from a national guy, and he said, "Who's to say that the Pistons can't sell off on all three members of their core?" They mentioned Sasser, Ivey, and Duren. Like, who's to say they can't, trade off all three of these guys because Trajan didn't draft these guys. Maybe he wants to bring in his guys. Maybe he wants to bring in veterans. I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see what happens in the preseason and. That seems like so long away. I think another month or so, month and a half until the preseason happens. But again, I think it's Duren has more to prove. I think with Ivey, I have a good understanding of what he could be in the league. I think he could either be a guy that you talk about as possibly a 20-point per game scorer, or the low end, maybe he's a sixth man. Maybe he's just one of those guys that just comes off the bench and just lights it up offensively. But again, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with both of them. Do you have time for some Q&A questions from people that are watching right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got all the time in the world.
So Detroit Ballin actually asked you a question, and I apologize that we did not get to your question earlier. So he asked, to me, Ivey would be a better point guard because he'd be like Ja, where he could space the floor better. So he was talking about when we were discussing Cade Cunningham possibly playing off ball, and he kind of wants to know if you agree with him with this opinion he had about Jaden Ivey playing point guard.
People complain a lot about Cade turning the ball over, which was warranted, and it got better as the year went along. Ivey gets to the paint too many times and leaves his feet without a plan that leads to him throwing the ball somewhere where it shouldn't be. Turnovers like that. And you see it sometimes, like I mentioned just a minute ago in that game against the Kings where Cade was out and he gets into a groove and that's not happening. And then he does look like the Ja Morant comparisons that he was getting out of college. I don't think I've seen it consistently enough over these last 2 years, but I also wouldn't be shocked silly if he's coming out of the gate more comfortable under JV Bickerstaff, and then that might start to make sense. As of right now, it doesn't to me. Just haven't seen it consistently enough, and I think that he's too turnover prone as a decision maker to be that, but I wouldn't write it off. That's the last thing I'm doing is writing it off. I think that there's a real world where he looks so much more comfortable under Bickerstaff, and all of a sudden that does start to make sense, but I just haven't seen it consistently enough personally.
I think the Ja comparisons, I thought it was just the haircut at the time.
You don't hear him anymore after he shaved it. So
yeah, you don't hear him as much. Everyone said he lost his aura when he shaved his hair, but I'm not going to get into that rabbit hole with Pistons Twitter and Pistons fans on Facebook about aura and stuff. I'm too old for this shit, man. We used to call it. I'm dating myself. What do we call it in high school? Swag.
Yeah,
that's how old I am, man. But to answer Detroit Ballin's question, I think Ivey has guard skills. I think he does have point guard skills. The Ja stuff, Ja Morant to me is just an electric guard. There's not too many players in the league that when I watch Ja Morant, I don't see like the Ja and Jaden Ivey comparisons whatsoever. I think they're both athletic and they're both fast. But Ja's dunking on people's head. He can get to the lane at will. To your point, Jaden Ivey can get past people, but I think he plays like so fast that he's like, oh crap, what do I do now? Like there'll be a guy like sitting there for a charge and he just goes too fast and it's a turnover. And I think that comes with more reps. But I don't really think that he's an everyday point guard. I think it depends on situations. It depends on team, and it depends on matchups. Could I see him, being a point guard with JB Bickerstaff and Cade's playing off ball? Sure. It depends on the matchup. It depends on the team. It depends on the situation of the game. But I don't think he's an everyday point guard. But Detroit Ballin, do appreciate that question that you do to ask, but I just don't see the Ja Morant comparisons like at all.
He has the first step that can match that. What he doesn't have is the ability to take off and literally have his head over the rim, looking down on a center and punching it on him.
Yeah.
You get those posters out of Ivy once or twice a month at the very most. You get those posters out of John Morant on a night-to-night basis. He's got the first step. He's got that. The ability to rise up and make plays that way, you don't see as often with Ivy.
Yeah. This isn't so much a question, but this is more of just a comment from Mega Hustle. So something tells me that Langdon will probably trade Sasser. I've been feeling that too. I just don't really see a pathway for him. How do you feel about Sasser and just rotation, depth chart, or just minutes for that matter?
So we were talking earlier about Langdon, like reevaluating this roster because these are not his guys. Marcus Sasser feels like the very, very pinnacle of a Troy Weaver guy. That was a guy that Troy Weaver traded up for in the draft to go get because he really wanted him. I like Sasser. I think that his scoring ability to, go get a bucket at any given moment is something that's not easy to find in this league. It's not just everyone can do that for sure. But no, there's definitely a real world where Langdon feels very differently about some of the players that Troy Weaver went out of his way to go get. And I think that Sasser is probably the number one guy on that list. But at this point, it's so hard to get a read on Langdon because, he's obviously talked a lot. But every time that a player is asked about individually, it's not the Sassers of the roster. It's how do you feel about Cade? And those are easy answers for a new GM or new president.
Yeah, I think Sasser to me, like when I was doing a depth chart video, I was looking at shooting guard. And I was like, okay, there's no pathway for shooting guard minutes because you brought in Tim Hardaway, who you traded for. You brought in Malik Beasley, who is probably maybe going to get started in minutes, maybe like high 20, 25 minutes a game. Ivy, and I was like, Sasser would be your 4th-string shooting guard, so that's probably not going to work. Then I'm looking at backup point guard, and we don't really have one. Like, is that the pathway for him to play backup point guard, which I don't really think is his role, and I think it would be a mistake to try to play him. To Mega Hustle's point, I think there is a very strong possibility he is the casualty with Trajan Langdon and him possibly trying to trade him because, to your point, he didn't draft him, not his guy. And I think he has enough value to at least get you something. Maybe it's a future 2nd-round pick. Maybe it's a late 1st-round pick. Maybe it's a rotational player. You never really know how other people and other organizations, front offices view a guy like that. He is undersized, but the one elite skill he has is just scoring the basketball, and he's really good at that. And I think the way the NBA is driven offensively, you need bucket getters like Sasser. I just don't really see a clear pathway for him for minutes. I think right now he might get like 5 to 10 minutes a night. And it's just like, do you really want to, give a guy 5 to 10 minutes a night and kind of just maybe have him as an emergency break the glass type of shooting guard or, try to maybe do backup point guard with him? I don't know. I personally think he's going to be a casualty though.
Yeah, and the other side of the spectrum too, though, is it's like, what's his trade value? There's no team that's going to sit there and rifle off a 1st-round pick for the rights to Marcus Sasser. So it's like, okay, maybe the role that you just mentioned is a break the glass shooting guard type of guy, maybe spot minutes here or there. If they're really going to lean into that staggering Ivy and Cade as our point guards, maybe, Beasley and Hardaway always play games. If you look at their game logs over the years, they don't get hurt very much, knock on wood. So who knows really at this point? All I do know is if we do decide to move off of him, like, you're not getting that 1st-round pick back. That's for sure. That's not happening. So
25, I believe it was, or 24, like a really late 1st. I think we had to trade like 2 seconds to get him. And then you kind of look at the spectrum for like Troy versus Trajan. Trajan gets Bobby Klintman, and he only had to trade 1 second to go get him. And it's just like,
and take on Wendell Moore's contract.
Yeah, night and day. But I do agree with you, Mega Hustle. I think he may be a casualty to possibly get moved because it's not that he's a bad player. I just don't really see like where he's going to get the minutes. Let's see.
Real quick, speaking of Bobby Klintman, we didn't mention him at all in this podcast. Obviously, balled out of the summer league. Do you think he gets minutes this year? You think he gets on the floor?
I think he's the one player where I could see him getting G League assignments, but I could also see him like getting like 10-man rotation minutes just because there's a lot he does offensively that I think JB Bickerstaff and the coaching staff would value. Like his ability to shoot over 40% in summer league, I think was impressive. I think his playmaking is something that I'm very intrigued with. You kind of have like another point forward on this team. I think all the things that he doesn't do well right now is something that he could work on, and that's just adding more weight. I think if he gets in the weight room, gets a little bit bulkier, he's not going to have those plays where he can't get to the basket or he's not strong enough to defend an opposing offensive player. I think with him, he does everything like really well. There's not anything he does that's like absolutely elite. He's just like one of those guys, kind of like Tobias Harris, if you will. Like Tobias Harris does not have an elite skill, but he does things really well, and he's a good basketball player. That's kind of how I view Bobby Klintman.
Yeah, for sure. And when we saw him in the summer league, he was kind of like the talk of the team because he just performed way above what everyone expected. And with the way he played, it felt like he was so comfortable that you could almost just envision him like seamlessly playing real NBA minutes because of how comfortable he looked. And he wasn't balling out of the summer league because he was able to take 20 shots a night. He was just getting it in where he fit in. And you could picture him doing that in NBA setting as well. But like you said, if he puts on more weight, that'll add another wrinkle because during the summer league, he shot the ball from three. When he was going to the hoop, he showed that he could play make. What he didn't show in the summer league was his ability to finish at the rim at all. I don't remember any rim finishes from him at all. So maybe that's something that could be more of a problem, especially in an NBA setting versus summer league where defenses are a little bit more alert and keyed in. But I want to see it. I do want to see it. I want to see him play in a real game at some point sooner than later where it's not chucking him in at the last 2 minutes just to, get him on the floor.
Yeah, I think he's a player that it wouldn't surprise me if he does get like real burn, like real minutes, just because I think there's so much things that he does that this team needs, like the floor spacing, the playmaking. And when you get a guy in the second round and you locked him up for, I believe, 4 years for like around $8 million, and if he hits, that's a guy that possibly could be your long-term four when Tobias Harris's contract is up. That's the way you have to look at it too, is you brought in Tobias, but you also drafted a guy that kind of has a similar game to Tobias. Like when Bobby shoots, I see a lot of Tobias Harris.
Yeah, I think he compared himself to Tobias Harris in an interview with Kevin O'Connor. Maybe this is like the Mandela effect, but now that you mention it, I'm pretty sure he said that himself.
Yeah, he said Michael Porter Jr., which he's already got the threes down. Like that's all Michael Porter Jr. does is shoot threes. I think he said Nicholas Batum, which is kind of like Nick Batum, obviously not the most sexy name, but like defensively, he was still locking people up at
young Nick Batum was a valuable player,
Yeah,
Portland Nick Batum, give me that at pick 37 every day and twice on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's valuable. Like defensively, there were games in the summer league where he kind of took the charge defensively. He had a ball stripped and then he came back and blocked the shot. It's just like there's a lot with him that I like and I'm very intrigued with. But it would not surprise me if we saw, real minutes, like 10 to 15 minutes, just to see like what's there and if he can handle like NBA competition right off the gate.
For sure, that's what I want to. I want to see him get a chance, and then we figure it out from there.
Which I think he will. I don't think JB is pretty transparent with like everything he talked about. I don't think he's gonna like pull a Monty and say one thing and then do the complete opposite.
Yeah,
he just seems like the type of guy that is going to try it out, and if it works, cool. If it doesn't, we'll maybe try to develop you to get to the point where we want you to become that player. But would not surprise me if we do see some Bobby Klintman stuff pretty soon. I'm supposed to actually talk to one of his trainers on the podcast. I just trying to like figure out like scheduling because he's like in Switzerland and
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, because he is. I forgot. Yeah, he was working out with Jerebko for a minute too. That was a clash that I did not expect. It makes sense now that I know that he's Swedish. But it's like, all right, yeah.
I mean, I believe JJ still lives here in Detroit or like in the area, so probably like Bloomfield Hills or Birmingham, because none of those guys live in Detroit. Like, let's be honest,
Yeah.
they're all in Beeham or like West Bloomfield. Like, none of those guys live near Detroit, even though they say, "Yeah, I live in Detroit." No, you don't.
Yeah.
Let's see. This is a question from Michael Powell. He said, "Signing vets is good. A good move to improve the roster, but can those vets be productive and get us to 30 to 32 wins, in your opinion?"
Yeah, and I think, we touched on this earlier, and that's exactly what I said, 30 wins. I think that the two main takeaways from that is the fact that, one, the vets that we got aren't the sexiest names, but the guys that they're replacing just makes it a bigger gap than what people anticipate. The difference between Tobias Harris every night out there versus Isaiah Livers or Kevin Knox out there is a huge jump. And the other thing to take away from that is, for us Pistons fans right now, 30 wins sounds like a daunting task because we're so used to seeing 14 wins, 17 wins, 30 wins in the NBA. Sometimes you can trip and fall and stumble your way into 30 wins in the NBA. The Memphis Grizzlies did it this past year. They had John Morant for 6 games and Desmond Bane for like 30. They had guys out there that I had never heard of, and there is not that many guys that get NBA minutes that I don't know their name. Memphis Grizzlies had a lot of them, and they still wound up with like 27 wins. 30 wins is not some impressive feat that we need to have loaded team with all-stars and proven guys at every position, at every rotation minute to get to. So I think it's very realistic. I think that it's really just going to come down to if everyone can stay healthy and the young guys take the improvements that you would hope for,
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like, nothing against Isaiah Livers, but for whatever reason, he forgot to shoot the basketball. Like, he forgot how. I don't know what happened.
Right.
John Beilein left and he forgot how to shoot. I don't know. Maybe there's a correlation there, but to your point, yeah, you're replacing Tobias Harris, or you're replacing Isaiah Livers with Tobias Harris, which I think is easily maybe 15 to 18 points a game, and just a vet that's been here. He knows how to win. And then you traded for Tim Hardaway Jr., who was like the third leading scorer on the Dallas Mavericks, who just made the NBA Finals. And I think he's a guy that could kind of play like that Alec Burke last year, if you will. Like, he kind of come in off the bench, get you points, play make a little bit if you need him to, and just kind of be that vet that the younger guys need. And then Malik Beasley is just one of those guys that I think he is going to be a fan favorite because he's from Detroit. His mom's from the area. He's an elite 3-point shooter, and he shoots a lot of them. He shoots like 7 to 8 per game, and he hits like close to 38 to 40 at a 40% clip. So I think the vets that we did sign can improve the roster, can get us to 30 to 32 wins. I remember when Van Gundy was here his first year and he won 32 games, and Pistons fans were like, "Man, this is bullshit. Like, fire Van Gundy." And we just had 14 wins, and we're like, bro, like, I'd go back for 30 wins. Like, holy crap, this is terrible.
That's what I was saying. Like, 30 wins is not that much if you're not a scarred Pistons fan who's used to seeing 14. So it's very doable. And like you said, too, like, these guys, third leading scorer for the Sixers, third leading scorer for the Mavericks, their biggest knocks, if you ask Sixers fans why they don't like Tobias, or if you ask Mavs fans why they don't like Tim, it's because they were making too much money and they underperformed in the playoffs. Neither of those two things are relevant to us. We need guys who show up in the regular season and play decent ball night in and night out, and I believe that they can do that.
Yeah, same here. Like, I remember so I do have some fans that are Sixers fans that will watch this from time to time, and they're trying to tell me how Tobias Harris is. And I was like, buddy, I watched Tobias Harris when we went 44 and 38. I know how Tobias Harris is. He's a good third, fourth option, probably on the championship team, but you guys paid him like he was a max player. He was making more money than Blake Griffin. Like, respectively, if you look at their contracts, like, he was making more. Like, That was a Sixers problem. They chose Tobias over Jimmy Butler. If they had to do that over again, I think they might choose Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Like a stinker in the playoffs. Well, don't sign up to have Tobias Harris be your top wing scorer if you want to compete for a championship. Like, have him be your fourth option, not your third. So when he does have a bad night, you're not mad at him because he's making $37 million a year and you absolutely need 20 points a night out of him, every night. Because he'll get you that most of the time. But
yeah, most of the time, I think so. This is actually a fun question, and I could probably talk about this now that it's like off season and it happened. But Wes Weaver Jr. says, "Is this the right time for us to trade for Trae Young?"
I don't know. What do they want? I guess.
Well, the reason why I said that before is during the season, the Hawks offered Trae Young for Cade Cunningham straight up. The Pistons said no, obviously. So the Hawks obviously want to rebuild. They just got rid of DeJounte Murray. They're kind of retooling, drafting Risha Shea. You still have Trae Young, Clint Capella. Would not surprise me if we do see a Trae Young trade probably in the next 6 to 12 months. My guess is LA. I think it's going to be the Lakers just because of that, LeBron connection. Him and Trae are very close.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the Pistons have the players. And what I mean by that is I don't think they want to trade Cade. Maybe they get into a conversation with another player, but I think Cade for them is probably off the table. Like a Cade for Trae swap, I don't think fans would really like that.
No, I think that would be misguided because, okay, we trade for Trae. If we make that trade, what do we do with Trae now? We don't have the pieces around Trae to be competitive either. So it's like, now what? Like now that seems very misguided because Trae is 26, something like that, 25, 26. Unless you have some other mastermind plan that's also going to bring in other guys that will make the team compete, which I don't think is realistic. What's the point? What's the point of having Trae if you're losing Cade and all of that happens? But, when you mentioned earlier about like a potential moving off of Ivy, Duren, and Sasser, is there a world where they could somehow make that money match and those three go out for Trae to come back in and we just put all our eggs in that basket? And even then, like that, I like Trae. I'm a Trae believer, but I don't know.
The perfect team for Trae Young to me is the Orlando Magic because I think they have the pieces for him to be successful. And Orlando's biggest issue is point guard. They just signed KCP. Yeah. They just signed KCP. KCP can switch and hide Trae. They have Paulo, they have Franz, they have pieces, they have draft picks. I think Trae in Orlando would make more sense. You need a roster that has good defenders for him to be successful. And I just don't think Detroit would be a good fit ideally. I'm really happy the Pistons did reject that trade. I actually heard that from somebody that works, around the Pistons every day. But I wanted to wait a couple of months until like the offseason to kind of like tell that reporting because there's been like a lot of stuff that the Pistons like got offered and they obviously said no to that I have not repeated on this podcast, which I felt like the time was like appropriate because it's August, but I don't to answer your question, Wes, I don't think there's ever going to be a right time for the Pistons to trade for Trae Young. I just don't think he's the type of player that, maybe Trajan would like really want to build around.
Yeah, I mean, that's news to me. And I guess it makes sense from their perspective. It also makes sense why we would hang up the phone instantly on a Cade for trade swap, though. It just doesn't make sense for us. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like I said, he's a good player, but I think the situation has to be more catered around him for him to be successful because he's had games where, he's close to leading to the NBA in assists at 30, 40-point games. He can shoot the ball. He just does not defend. He's just cherry picking on offense like 90% of the time.
Yeah, 100%. If we really want to talk about swings on stars, I think the Devin Booker is the more fun one, especially now that Lowry's off the table for a year. Bring him back to the state, and then we're really cooking. But again, that's just too out there.
Yeah, the book stuff, I think it'll happen when he's like 35 or like so washed. It's kind of like he'll be our Tracy McGrady in like 2029.
Yup. Hang him next to the pictures of Iverson and McGrady and the Pistons red, white, and blue. Sounds about right.
Basically. This is a question from Ryan Boseman. Do you view Sasser and Holland thriving together long term as two-way players, or do you think one of them will be traded or even role reduced? You want to take that one, or
Yeah, I'm just thinking, and I mean, long term is the key word there, because if you remove that, no, like it, I know that on draft night that Langdon said that there's a vision where they can play together, and it's like, okay, the only way that's a possibility right now is if we put Stewart at the 5 to add some spacing, and Bickerstaff comes up with some offensive stats that are so creative that I can't even envision them at this point in time. Because if not, we end up back where we were last year with a bunch of non-shooters around Cade with no spacing, and we know how that goes. So long term, if Fred Vincent works these miracles, sign me up. But that's not going to happen overnight, and it's not something that you would want to count on or bet on personally for me. But if it does happen, like, we're in great shape. Both of the guys have so many other plus traits, and at their age, they're so intriguing. But realistically, for them to share the floor together, one of them, at the very least, preferably two of them, learn how to shoot the ball at a league average clip or close.
Yeah, I think ideally you basically hit all the nail on the head with this question. They both have to become at least league average shooters. I think right now, no. I think you would have to separate them. And I think Sasser would be higher on the pecking order, in my opinion, just because I think Sasser is like this close to becoming an elite defender, to the point where like maybe you see him on the ballot for an all defensive team, because he was locking up guys his rookie year that like he should have not like been locking up.
Superstars, SGA, real dudes.
Like blocking Zach LaVine's shot. Like nobody like really blocks his shot. Like he was so versatile defensively. I think Sasser to me is going to be higher in the pecking order. And I think more people are really curious to see what Fred Vincent can do with the Sasser Thompson, because if he develops any sort of jump shot, you got a superstar, in my opinion. You got a guy that can pass. You got a guy that can defend. If he develops even like a 30 to 35%, 3-point shot, you got a guy that I think a lot of Pistons fans will be very happy with. In terms of Holland, I think Holland's jump shot, there's not as much you don't have to like really like work with him as much, because I think fluidly his mechanics look good. I don't think Fred has to work with him as much as he would have to do with the Sasser. I think Holland might develop faster offensively than Sasser will. So that's just kind of like how I view him, because if you watch the G League Ignite, that team was god awful. Like I was just like, oh wow, they lost almost as much games as the Pistons did last year.
Yeah, they won 2.
Yeah, I was like, oh wow. So that's interesting. But he really didn't have a point guard for him to like get set up. Like he had to basically initiate everything he wanted to do, where he's gonna get to play with guys like Cade and Jaden Ivey and others that can set him up where maybe he's in more of a comfortable defined role. But I think long term, that's what Trajan Langdon talked about, of having these archetype of players, having like an Sasser Thompson and Ron Holland. Like if they both develop and they're two-way like players around Cade Cunningham, maybe possibly you have a big three with all those guys. You never really know.
Yeah, and the sky's the limit for both of them. And like we mentioned earlier, if either of them hit, that's the archetype you want in this league. Two-way wings that are athletic, can guard, it's everything. I said on one of my videos the other day with Sasser, it's like right now the absolute floor is Tony Allen with bounce, but the ceiling is like a Kawhi Leonard, a new age Kawhi Leonard. So where that's going to go, most likely outcome is probably somewhere in the middle, but he's probably got the biggest range of realistic outcomes out of anybody on this team.
Yeah, I mean, he could be like Ron Artest, or he could be like a Al-Farouq Aminu. Like that's like the drop off is huge. And to answer Ryan's question, he had a follow-up question. If they're both threes, we'll work with them together. Absolutely. Like, I don't want to compare these two because they just won a championship. But when you look at Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, they're both small forwards, but they still make it work together. And I know some people are like trying to compare like Ron Holland and Asar Thompson. Their games may look similar when you're watching highlights, but if you dive into the games, they're very different. They're very different. If you like actually go in to watch some, Pistons games, some OTE games, or G League Ignite, or even Summer League games, both of these guys are small forwards that struggle to shoot the ball, but offensively their approach to the game is a little bit different. So I think, to your question, Ryan, your second question, I do think that they both can play together. They just have to develop that offensive game, and that's why Trajan brought in Fred Vincent. And if you kind of look at all the players that he's worked with, each one of those players has developed a jump shot. I mean, you look at Lonzo Ball. He wasn't really a good three-point shooter. He developed a three-point shot. Hopefully, we do see some Lonzo Ball pretty soon, because I actually do miss watching him play. But that was a fun question. I haven't really thought about it yet. Let's see. We'll do one more because we've been on for like a really long time. This is a fun one. Do you see Stu adding something else to his game this year? He has every year. He has been in the league.
I'm trying to think. What has he added to his game outside of shooting?
He got better at rim protection. I don't want to say like he was like a lead at it, but he was at least attempting the block shots. His passing got a little bit better. Putting the ball on the floor. Shooting has progressively gotten better each year, but I mean, I don't know.
So I think that he was like a good rim protector based on his measurables and everything. Of course, not the tallest dude in the world, makes up for it a lot with wingspan, but doesn't get off the floor that great. So I think like his rim protection is probably something that is about as good as it's going to be right now. Where I think I don't know if he will, but where I think that he could really elevate his game is the ability to attack closeouts. Because last year he started to shoot the ball better as the year went on. At the start of the year, teams were still disrespecting him off the line. He made them pay for it. Now guys are closing out. When the guys close out, he didn't really show the ability to throw a head fake, which with his slower release tends to work pretty well when you've got a guy who shoots the ball like that. You see it with like Embiid a lot, where you can get the guys off the ground and then go right by him, where Stewart is starting to see these closeouts more often, and he really didn't show me the ability to do a whole lot with that and then get to the paint, use his size and his strength to finish at the rim or pass out of it. If he can make that, that's just a whole other wrinkle to his game that makes him look like I look at him completely different. I would maybe think about wanting to see him back at the 4 if he was able to attack these closeouts in a different way. But do I think it's going to happen? I don't know. I guess I never really considered it because I just don't see it based on his, athletic ability and his feel and everything else. But if he does, wash out, so yeah.
I would, to your point, kind of piggybacking off of it, when they would kind of run him off that 3-point line, it would usually be a turnover. It would be like a really bad pass. But you saw kind of glimpses of him starting to put the ball on the floor, whether it was just trying to get to the basket with layups or little floaters. I think the one part of his game that he might get better at is passing, because he is going to start getting run off that 3-point line, because teams are going to say, okay, this guy has gotten progressively better each game. And the volume is actually there. I think 38% is what he shot last season. I think there's a world where he becomes a better passer, and there's a world where he gets better at putting the ball on the floor. There's just some plays where like he looks really athletic and he's like dunking when they run him off the 3-point line. You're like, where the hell did that come from? Like,
yeah, it's like it shocks you because it's like it's there, it's just not consistent.
they haven't really like explored that. But to your question, Chili, I think that, passing, getting better at, decision making, processing, getting run off that 3-point line. I think that's the next stage of development. I think, defensively, he's very versatile. I think he's one of the Pistons' better defenders. If you do ask me, I'd put him in my top 3 as, one of the Pistons' better defenders. But personally, I think passing and just processing of getting run off that 3-point line, though.
Yeah, for sure. And if that does happen, it's a whole different player in my eyes. You're looking at a guy who can do a lot more offensively. And just a shot, you got to give him credit for that. He's developed at a rate shooting the ball that I don't remember a Piston developing like that, where he came in the league as a non-shooter to a dude who is putting up 4 attempts a game and hitting them above league average in a matter of 2 seasons. So yeah, all the credit in the world for that alone.
Yeah, no, Pistons fans don't like him. And they're like, why is Stewart on the team? I was just like, man, you guys are going to be crying when he's bullying you in the playoffs on like OKC or something like that. Like,
yeah, I'm telling you, man, if he just was, like you mentioned earlier, an energy big off the bench, getting 25 minutes as a backup energy big that can shoot, space the floor in a role like Naz Reid is in right now, he instantly becomes a Pistons fan favorite instead of what you mentioned he is now, which is a guy who gets a lot of blame based on being miscasted instead of the reality of who he is.
Yeah, it's not really his fault. It's more like the organization and like just like trying to make him into a stretch 4 when he's not really. He's like a standstill 3-point shooter. He's not a movement like power forward like Tobias. Like if you ran Tobias Harris off a 3-point line, I guarantee you Tobias Harris could reposition himself in the corner and shoot a 3 within the same play. Where Stu, if he gets run off the 3-point line, it might be a pass and he might set up a pick for Cade. Like completely different forwards, and I think they have more of a traditional forward now with Tobias. But we have been on for almost 2 hours, got almost 500 people in here. So shout out to everyone watching on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I do want to give you the floor again to plug your YouTube channel, plug your Twitter, whatever you're working on, so that people can go listen to your YouTube channel and kind of just your overall thoughts of just like how you make videos and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm still relatively new to the Pistons content stuff here. I think my first video I made was like a draft preview 3 or 4 days before the draft. So it's been super fun. At Pistons Jacob, you just type in Pistons Jacob. I think the link will be in the description as well. You'll find me pretty fast. Kind of the basis of the content is just shorter form content where, we're talking 10-minute videos, just covering certain Pistons topics almost daily. I know we're going into kind of a stretch right now where I think it's going to be hard for every NBA content creator at this point in time to kind of muck some things up and whatnot, but plan on doing some season previews for each individual player, stuff like that. My Twitter is at Jacob Unbeatable. That's just a leftover tag from my days as a 2K streamer. So if you do want to follow me there, it's not exclusively Pistons content over there. I tweet about anything that comes to my mind, which is a lot of Pistons stuff, but there's other topics in there, whether it might be the NFL or, sometimes video games, a new college football game that came out recently. I've been grinding quite a bit, college football itself. So a lot of different stuff over there. But the main thing I'm working on right now is just the Pistons videos, and it was a good time to come on here because, it's just shocking. I'm used to watching this podcast in the seat of a viewer instead of the guy next to Anthony. So it's been fun.
Hey, man, you're welcome anytime. I always tell any guests that I have on that. I just love talking basketball with, different individuals because each one of you have different takes on the team. I would say you're probably one of the more level-headed Pistons fans I've talked to. I've had Pistons fans sitting in the same seat you're sitting in telling me we're going to win 50 games this year. So there's a lot of different fandoms. There's different, like I said, I'll talk to people. I've talked to people in this live stream. I've invited them on, sent a link, and like talked to people over in France, Australia. Like we have a lot of Pistons fans that are in Australia, by the way, which blows my mind. So
it's always so weird hearing like the origin story as well. Mine was very simple. My dad was watching the 03-04 Pistons play basketball at the start of the year. You hear the gong and Ben Wallace, and as a kid, that just draws you in. you hear like stories. Jack on Pistons Twitter, he's like, yeah, I liked Andre Drummond and decided to pledge my allegiance to whatever team drafted him. I'm like, dude, I would have got out so fast, man. Like, I don't know. I would have dipped out by now if I was some of those guys. But shout out to all of them, man. It's definitely crazy to see this, and I didn't realize how many fans there really were until I started really getting into the contest space.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many people in the Pistons community. I think it would shock you. There's a lot of like good content creators. There's the analytical guys like over at the Detroit Bad Boys that just break down everything from like, you know, shooting percentages to guys like Koo, who does a podcast 5 days a week, 365. Koo deserves a medal, man. Like the fact that he has to make content right now, I don't know how he's doing it. And the Jack Kelly, to your point, like Jack is in Australia, an Andre Drummond truther, and he's still stuck around. Shout out to Jack, Pistons intellect. Like, holy crap, man! Like, I thought, because like I've talked to some Australian fans, and most of them like, yeah, like we love the Bad Boys. Like, it's like rugby style of just like, you know, football over here. But the fact that he said I liked Andre Drummond at Connecticut, and that's why I'm a Piston fan, I was like, bro, respect. Like,
yeah,
you haven't even like got to witness like, you know, any of the Going to Work crew or Grant Hill or any of those like good players that we have like it all. Like the fact that Andre Drummond is like your GOAT and why you like the Pistons, it's pretty crazy. I bet a lot of young Pistons fans like 10 years from now are gonna say, yeah, I got into the Pistons when we drafted Cade.
That's wild. You know, I feel bad. I really do. You know, we need to turn around for them. I mean, for me, you know, it's like I watched the Going to Work era, and if what the Going to Work era meant is that I had to be cursed with bad basketball for a decade plus, it's like maybe it's not a fair trade-off, but it's one I would make again because that team was so special, you know, like in every way. So for these young cats that really are bought in, bless their heart, man.
Yeah, really, 14 win season, man. I miss that Going to Work team. I really do. The fact that you got like Chauncey coaching and you got She doing his podcast, and it's so crazy nowadays. Yeah. But we do appreciate everyone watching. We're gonna end this podcast though. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, there's maybe some Rico Hines runs because they already started those up. Don't mean
it's Rico Hines season. Yeah,
it's Rico Hines season. He did his team first. He did the Philadelphia 76ers. Maybe we'll see some Detroit Pistons Rico Hines runs. So it's off-season workout videos, you guys. I'm sorry if I post them and talk about them, but there's nothing else to talk about. See you guys next week.